Hey there, and welcome back to Tim Talks. Today we are talking pumpkin pie. You heard me right, pumpkin pie. Just because you're on a keto diet doesn't mean you can't have your pie and eat it too. Check it out. Let's get started. I'm really excited about this recipe today because I've been doing some research on the internet to find some good keto pie crust recipes. This one really seems good to me. This is from the Fountain Avenue Kitchen. And I don't know anything more about it than that, but it's got some really nice recipes. Theirs is not low carb, so I'm going to substitute some of their ingredients and turn this into a low carb recipe. Starts off with 2 cups of fine almond flour. Of course, you can use almond meal. It'll have a little more rustic look. That's cool. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon each here of baking soda and kosher salt, and I'm going to dump those right in. I've also got a tablespoon here of Truvia, which is the sweetener that I like to use. Use whatever sweetener you like. If you're not on the keto diet and you just want a gluten-free pie crust, use sugar. Use whatever sweetener you like. I'm going to mix these together here real quick, just to make sure they're evenly distributed before we add the fat. And actually, that's what we have next. I have 2 tablespoons of ghee, and of course the recipe for making this is on my channel. There's a video for doing that. Very easy and really delicious and cheap. And I'm also, well, let's give that a go real quick first. Get that in there. I'm going to pulse it a little bit. Okay. Oops. It's all right. And I'm also going to add in 1 beaten egg. And we're going to get that to form a dough. And that's, as you can see, it's doing it right away, forming a nice little ball there. Okay, we've got the ghee and the egg mixed in. I'm also going to add in just a little shot there, about 1/2 teaspoon of some, maybe it's a little bit more because it's so delicious, of pure vanilla extract. And now I'm going to give that a whirl. Makes a very nice ball. You don't want to overmix it. And next, I'm going to press it into a very generously buttered pie plate. This really fragrant, delicious dough came together like a dream in the food processor, and now we're just going to push it out with our hands, at first anyway, all over our pie plate. One of the advantages of this recipe is that you don't have to roll it out between sheets of parchment paper. You can just press it down into the pie plate. So here's what it looks like when we're pretty much done. I can smooth it out with, of course, the bottom of my measuring cup, but it really doesn't need it. This is already pretty easily spreadable around the whole pie plate. Now what we're going to do is we're going to blind bake this. First I'm going to prick it with a fork so it doesn't puff up, like this. Don't worry, the holes will bake back together. Nothing will run out of it. We're going to have a pretty thick pumpkin-based custard that we're going to stick in there. I'll show you how to do that next. Anyway, this is going to go into a 350-degree oven, and since we're going to bake it again, we're only going to bake it for about 10 to 12 minutes. I'm going to bring it out after then. We'll have a look at it and see if it doesn't need a little more time, but we're going to do this first, and then we'll go on with the pumpkin filling. Here's what you're going to need to make the pumpkin filling. I've got here 2.5 cups, or you could use about anywhere between 2 and 2.5 cups of canned pumpkin. This is my own home canned pumpkin that I grew in my garden this summer. You're going to need some vanilla extract, a cup of heavy whipping cream. Again, for our keto recipe, we're not going to use any milk products that have carbohydrates in them. I've got 2 beaten eggs here. This is 3/8 of a cup, or 3 tablespoons of stevia. You could use 3/4 of a cup of any other sweetener that you like if it's the equivalent measure of sugar. Here I've got 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves, 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground nutmeg, which I think is really the best way to use nutmeg. I've also got about 1/4 teaspoon of salt here that we're going to use, 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And actually here, this is not difficult to put together. it's kind of a dump and go. I'm going to put the spices in, and then I'm going to dump in our sweetener. Just going to kind of stir it together a little bit like this to get it started, because we're going to make sure we mix this thoroughly to make sure the spices don't end up all in one little lump somewhere, of course. And add in our egg. Get all that off there. And now I'm going to switch to a whisk to help incorporate that more thoroughly and better. I'm also going to add our cup of cream here. And again, use a rubber spatula. Don't leave it in the cup. Use it up. Oh, didn't mean for that to rhyme. Little public service message there. Okay. See, that blends up really nicely. And actually it's fairly pretty too. I'm going to add in about a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. I just eyeball that. Can you have too much? Well, if you really dump it in there. And here's an ingredient that you can leave out if you choose. I think that pumpkin pie just needs this flavor, and I can't think of any other way to get it for keto. So I'm also going to add in a tablespoon of molasses. A tablespoon of molasses only has 16 carbs. And you know what? This flavor in your pie is really going to make it seem like the pie that you knew. This recipe, by the way, is my grandmother's recipe. I got it out of the 1940 edition of the Woman's Home Companion Cookbook. And I have sort of tatters of it in my cooking library. And there we go. Now it's ready for our pie shell. And here's how our crust looks now that it's out of the oven. And it's really pretty much cooked through, I think. That's very nice. I think it's ready to be filled. And so let's check that out. Here we've got this filling that we just made. Notice that the color of it is a little lighter than what you may be expecting. Part of that is because we didn't use brown sugar. And here I'm just going to dump it on in there. We're going to fill up our crust with that. It's going to puff up a little bit during cooking, of course. This is a pretty standard custard. Get all that on there. No ingredient left behind. There we go. And clean up my spatula. I'm going to give that a little bit of a shake, even it out a little bit. I can also use my spatula to smooth it. I'm not terribly concerned about having it be perfect, as in all of my other recipes, as you know. There we go. I think that's perfectly fine right there. Now this is going to go back in that 350 degree oven for probably about 30 to 40 minutes. Nut flours, as I learned in my last video, tend to brown and actually even burn a little bit very easily in the oven. So we're going to cook this at a low temperature at 350 degrees for about 30 to 40 minutes, maybe 45. We'll see. Pies, you got to kind of watch when you do them, and you will have to test it by using a toothpick. But we're going to protect this edge to make sure it doesn't brown too much now that we're on the second baking by using a square of aluminum foil that's about the size of our pie plate. I'm going to fold it into quarters and cut a circle out of it, and then I'm going to put it around this. I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, here we go. And now I'm just going to lay that down on top, and you see it fits very nicely over it. And then I'm going to crimp the edges around so it stays in place. With just a little patience, you can get it into this shape pretty quickly. Now this is ready to go in our 350 degree oven for, I'm going to say, about 35 minutes. We'll check it with a toothpick at that time, and if we have to, we'll leave it in a little longer. Now here, it's been 35 minutes. I've just pulled it out of the oven, and I give it a shake, and you can see it's really pretty wobbly there. It's pretty liquid still in the center. And you know, again, I'm thinking about my grandmother's recipe, and it takes about 50 minutes for hers, and that's with a hotter oven, so about 425. And we're cooking at 350, so I'm going to put this back in for another half an hour, and we'll check it then. Okay, it's now been 30 minutes more, and here's how we check to see if it's done. First of all, let's have a peek under the foil ring there. Looking good, not burned, not even close. It's a beautiful golden brown color. Get that back on there because I think we're probably going to have to stick it back in the oven. Let's see. I'm going to insert this toothpick right here into the center of the pie, and if it comes out clean, we're done. If it doesn't, it's going back in. Hey, look at that, it came out clean. We're done. Now this needs to cool to room temperature. That's going to take a couple of hours. And then after that, it needs to go in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours. This is the hardest part. And there it is with the foil off. Isn't that a beautiful looking pie? And you can see the color has darkened a little bit too. That's pretty good. Anyway, that's got to cool and we'll be serving that soon. All right, it's been 4 hours now since it's been down to room temperature. It's really has a nice look to it. Let's cut a piece and give it a try. I'm going to cut a small, very small piece here. It's really not time for dessert, but I've got to try some of this pie. Let's see if we can get it out of there nicely. Had a little luck with that last time. Not always with me, as you know. There we go, maybe. Superfly's ready for a piece of pie. Here we go, soup. Oh, pretty much. Just got a little sliver there we're going to add to the side of our pie just to be neat. And all right, not the neatest slice in the world, but let's give it a try. Now I'm just dying to try this. Even without whipped cream, which I'm afraid I don't have on hand right now. That's how it tastes. Oh yeah, that's Grandma's pie, all right, let me tell you what. That is really good. The crust, while I have to admit the crust is not flaky, it's also not soggy, and it's very pleasant. The custard tastes just like Grandma's. So anyway, I'm very happy with this. You need to try this recipe, and I'd also like you to think about subscribing and liking, sharing, all of that stuff. Listen, thanks a lot for watching us here today on Tim Talks. We'll catch you later.